School Prep Room, saving you both time and money. Hello and welcome to School Prep Room's latest video tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at how to set up and use stored practicals. This is particularly useful to avoid overbooking, and it also saves time when booking equipment. You don't have to use stored practicals to use our booking system. You can just type in a list of things that you would like to book, but it does make the whole process a lot easier and quicker, and really helps things run more efficiently in the lab. So to do this, we need to click on Manage Practicals on the left hand side, and then choose Add Practical from the list that drops down. We then get a simple form that we need to fill in. First thing we need to do is select the topic under which we're going to store our practical. For this school, we have chemistry, physics and biology set as topics. You can set a whole range of different things that you might want there. So for example, you may have practicals filed under Key Stage 3. In order to find out how to set up topics and alter them, do watch our video tutorial on setting up and managing topics. In this case, I'm going to put my practical under the physics heading. We then need to give the practical a title. I'm going to call this one Looking at Boiling Points. These titles need to be distinct for your school. You can't have the same title for different experiments within your school's database. You also can't use apostrophes or double quotes in the titles because this causes problems with the website at later stages. You then can add a PDF file which will be attached to the practical. Technicians will be able to see that when they're setting up equipment, so if you have some detailed instructions you can put them in here. It really is useful if you're using some of the recommended practicals, particularly from the A-level syllabus, which can have some quite complex requirements. But much better is to add your equipment list into the box below, which is what we're going to do now. So really we want our equipment required to be a short, concise list of exactly what's needed. Now I have already saved a list and I'm just going to paste it in here to save us some time. But I'll talk you through what I've done. So I've said how many people this practical is set for. So it's set for 12 sets. And then I've put a list of the equipment and how much I need. So 36 test tubes, sodium chloride, 40 grams, etc., etc. This then allows the technician to quite quickly see what's needed, but we want to keep this list brief, so that's why I've used contractions here and here. And if you're concerned that those contractions will stop things like the health and safety searchers finding things, what you need to do is you need to make sure that when you add things to your stock room, you add commonly used contractions in there. If you want to understand a bit more about how to use the stock room or the health and safety features, then please do watch our videos on setting up your stock room and on managing health and safety. The next thing we need to do is to decide the maximum number of sets of this practical that we can set out at once. Now, if we set this to a large number, the default is 100. It basically means that everybody can do this practical at the same time in your school. And this may well be the case for many practicals. You'll be able to do that. In this case, we only have one digital thermometer and logger in our school. So we could only run one set of this practical at any one time. So I'm going to change this number to 1. You may have other reasons for changing this maximum number of sets. So for example, if you have a practical that's particularly involved, it may be physically possible to have sufficient equipment to do the practical with everybody all at once, but it may not be possible time-wise to run simultaneous sets of an experiment. And again, you might want to change that to perhaps 1 or 2 or something like that. So this will prevent the practical being booked more than once in any one period, this particular practical. I can now choose to ask the system to suggest health and safety information for this practical just by clicking on Suggest Health and Safety. What the system will do is it will look at all the text that we've added for equipment required, and based on that match it to information in our stockroom, pull health and safety information from there. It will also look at the Kleeps HasCard information that we store, and will make suggestions on which Kleeps HasCards are most appropriate for this practical. Now it's important to realize that in order to use the Kleeps HasCards and to view them, you do need to have a Kleeps login. So I'm going to click on Suggest Health and Safety, and we see now down at the bottom we have a hyperlink to the Kleeps HasCard. We see that it's found ethanol. We've got the highly flammable liquid and vapor from our stockroom information and the HasCard at the end. We then also found that we're using Bunsen burners, and we put some health and safety information when we added those to our stockroom, saying that they may be hot, etc. We've added that, and the system's automatically founded those and added them. It's also found a digital thermometer, which is in our stockroom database, but it's not something that has any hazards associated with it, so I'm going to remove that from our list now. It's important to realize that this search will only find things that the database already holds information on. So if you add something here that, for example, is dangerous, and it hasn't found it, you need to be aware of that and you need to look it up yourself. You also need to be aware that, of course, any experiment may have other hazards associated with it that this system isn't going to be picking up. So basically this is a suggestion for health and safety. It's there to aid you, but it's not a substitute for thinking through and looking at the risks and hazards yourself. You must do that. The next thing we come to in our list is limited resources. This allows us to select items that perhaps we only have a few of. So at the moment I've set our max number of sets for this practical to be 1. This means that this practical can only be booked once at any one time. However, I may have another practical that uses the digital thermometer and logger, and that potentially could be booked at the same time as this practical at the moment, without any warnings given. It's also possible that a teacher may think, I'd like to use the digital thermometer and logger in my practical today. I'm going to type that in and just book that individually aside from our stored practicals. At the minute, it would allow the system to do that. Nobody would get a warning. But what I can do is say that actually some of the equipment in this practical has limited resources, and I then get a drop-down list for all of the equipment stored in our system. Now I could scroll through this list for my digital thermometer, or I can just type it in, and we see that quite quickly it will pick that out from the phrase digital thermometer. It'll tell us how many we have in our system in total, so we have 1, and I now need to select how many this practical uses, which of course is 1. That would now be added to our practical. Perhaps I have other things that I want to add. I can click Add Item here, and more items can be added to our list. It's important to be really only using this when it's key to a piece of equipment. So for example, I'm not going to add test tubes here. We have hundreds of test tubes. The chances that all of them want to be used at one time is very, very small. I don't need to add that. Similar story with Bunsen burners. Bunsen burners there are plenty of for most situations that we work in, so I'm not going to add Bunsen burners to my list here. Really, it's for things that we only have 2 or 3 of, and it's possible that they may all be wanted at the same time at some point. If I make a big long list here, and particularly if I do that for several stored practicals, it will make booking the practicals much slower when you come to make a booking itself. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it with digital thermometers. I can now add some instructions. So I'm just going to add something very simple here. See sheets in filing. So I've told them just to have a look at the sheets in our filing cabinet. That might have been something I could have added as a PDF, but you get the idea of instructions here. It could be instructions for the technicians, it could be instructions for doing the lesson. You can type whatever you feel is appropriate in there. And then I can click on Add Web Resources, and this will allow me to add web addresses that are perhaps relevant for what we're doing. It could be a link to a YouTube video that you want to show, or it could be something else. In this case, I've chosen something from the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm just going to copy the domain name and paste it in here, and that will be added as a web resource, which will be clickable later on. Now you may look at all of this information and say, wow, that's a huge amount of information. How's that going to fit on our practical sheet? Well, when we view the bookings, the only information we'll actually see directly is this information here, the equipment required, and a link to any file that's been requested. All the rest of the information will be accessible, but only by clicking on requesting more details. So to see really how that works, do have a look at our video on viewing bookings, but I will show you at the end of this how that works out. So once we have our practical, we can then click on Add Practical, and that practical will now have been added to the system, and we'll get a message telling us that. Of course, once we've stored a practical, we might want to make some changes to it. So in order to look at the practicals we have stored, we can go to Manage Practicals and then View Practicals. And we'll get a list of all the practicals that are stored on the system. You can see that we have the practical name, the equipment. Now you can see it's been chopped off here, but if I click on it, I'll be able to see a full list. Which topic it's assigned to or group, any files that are associated with it, and we can click on those to have a look at those files. The SIMS ID of the person who added it, when it was added, and also the maximum number of this practical that can be run simultaneously. We can change the details in any of these practicals by clicking on the Edit function at the end on the left hand side, the green button there. This will give us all of the details to do with the practical that we're interested in. And we can change any of those at any point that we are needing to do that. Once we've done that, we click on Update at the bottom, and that will be updated on our system. We can also delete any practical we want by clicking on the red and white cross on the right hand side, and this will permanently remove the practical from the system. So if you do this, do remember that that information will not be retrievable any longer. Finally, let me show you how the details can be looked at in our View Bookings page. So if we go to Full Week here, we can see all of the bookings that have been made. In this case, there's only one. It's summer holiday at the minute. Now, this page has an awful lot of functions on it, which I'm not going to go through. If you want to learn how to use this page, then please have a look at our View Bookings videos. There's going to be 2 or 3 of those. But in this case, we have the practical that I've just added to the system here. And I just want to show you how we can see the full details. So if we click on the right hand mouse button to get the drop down menu, we can then click on Details, and now we can see the full details for that practical, and the hyperlinks both to the HAS cards and to the resources at the Royal Society of Chemistry are all active. We could click on those and we'd be taken to those web pages in a separate page. We can also print this entire full detail sheet by clicking on Print, and all of that will be printed out on our printer locally, so we could have a hard copy of it if we needed it for the lesson. So that about rounds it up for adding and working with stored practicals. If you have any questions or any problems with it, please do drop me an email and we'll have a look and see what we can do to sort it out. But I do hope it helps you solve problems and save time, and make running your prep room and your school science department much smoother. Thank you.